Hey folks, Salty Seaman here. Another Tales from the Fleet. Talking about a pretty personal experience I had. Again, jumping ahead chronologically here. We're going to go to my break in service. Talk about what it's dealing like coming back in, especially when it's basically like starting over again. In a lot of ways, this was my issue. I came back. Well, just go ahead and start from the beginning. I got out 2001, September. Uh, I actually did TAPS class during 9/11. But that's a completely different story. I'll tell a different time. But I did get out October 2000, October 2001. I went home, looked for a job, spent about a month feeling very fruitlessly because I kept feeling like I was getting stuff and then I would just never get, they'd stop calling back or something would happen. And finally, I get a call back. I get at the job. I'm a mortgage refinancing QA guy. I do it for a month. Nothing, told nothing but like, man, we're so glad to have you on the team. It's like, you've improved work so much. Then after about a month, right before they would have to hire me on permanently from a temp point of view, yeah, I get called in on a Monday morning, say you're not working out for us and you're gone. So, really, really blindsided, you know, put a lot of money into this job just on clothes alone. And, and never be giving any indication that, there was something wrong with my performance. And then suddenly, boom, yank, you're gone. Man, life's tough. And, and before that, I was already looking for a reason to get back in the Navy. Eventually came to me like, once I got out, I was like, I wasn't done with what I wanted to do. I think that, even while I was working, I was thinking, reserve time or something. Eventually, like I just knew, and that was just, of course, a wake up call. I went back in. It took months. It was changing jobs. I went from being a yeoman to a journalist. And I initially wanted to be an intelligence specialist. You've heard me some of my other stories. I have a lot of friends that were in IS, and I thought that was from what I knew of the job. Obviously, you can't know everything about a job like that, but it sounded exactly some stuff I wanted to do. There was 9/11 just happened. It was like, hey, this is a direct chance to deal with intel and make a difference against terrorism. And there's an aspect to creativity to that job, and critical thinking skills I think appeals to me a lot. And I was assured all the way going back in is like, oh yeah, you're going to keep your third class. And then like why IS3 is wide open, and you already have a secret. You still have a standing secret, so it's like easier for them. Blah blah blah. What they didn't know is for whatever reason at that particular moment in time, the IS rate had stopped allowing prior service, and whatever reason that is, I don't know. Someone in Intel can tell me why they would stop letting prior service into the intelligence specialist rating early 2002. I'd like to hear it. I'm very interested in what the reasoning is on there. But yeah, I was kind of left high and dry, and I was looking at crypto rates, and I did it really wasn't what I wanted in that career field. It would have been Intel, but at the same time, the guy had asked me, he's like, because the detailer when I went to MEPS told me, he knew off the top of his head, it's like, I don't think that's open for you, but anything else you want? And I offhanded said journalist is another option. But at the same time, saying it in the terms of like, I know that a thing is never open because that's what I got told. When I came into my first ship and realized there was this journalist rating, I was like, oh my God, that's totally what I would have done if I'd known. And they're telling me like, it's a really small rate and it's really, really hard to get into. It's just, it's a, because, told, and then there's evidence for it, and it's definitely tiny. It was a tiny rate, 500 people in the entirety of the Navy, I believe, at the time. So any ideas I had before I even got out, and I was thinking like, maybe I don't want to give this up yet. The idea of cross rating just seemed so foreign to me, and it seemed like an easier idea. Like, well, if I get out, don't like it, come back in, I can choose something else. Seemed easier than dropping. I'm gonna get this. I'm not even gonna say it. It's a change of personnel form. God, I used to be yeoman and know this stuff off the top of my head. 3 years that'll do it to you. But regardless, I couldn't drop a 1406 or what the hell it was called in my mind because I thought that's never going to work. If there was ever any future in the Navy, it's going to be in a different job, and you can't do that while you're in. You would have. I felt I had to if there was any chance I was going to do this. I would have to get out first and then come back in with that leverage. So that's kind of what I ended up working for. And it said I threw up the journalist thing, and the guy actually said that there's 2 open seats right now actually. And it weirdly just didn't register. I was just like, because I was so focused on Intel, I had the guy go look and verify, like, no, you can't do this. And literally, as I'm looking at the CT jobs, the crypto tech jobs, I'm like, wait, did he just say journalist was like, and like my brain was just so adamant against getting this little bit of information in there. I was surprised how long it took me to realize, like, no, you said there's journalists open, right? He's like, yeah, you totally open. Go and be what I thought was a JO3, and that's what I was told. I was like, hell yeah, of course, yeah, sign me up for journalism. Sign me up. It says you're in. Here, I got my, and I've been fooling around with it so goddamn long. Just months. It was just months at that point of getting and it wasn't even done yet. That was like the first half of the months and months to get this shit done, and a lot of it being for naught, which was really fucking irritating. But it's just one of those things. It's like you get a real big bummer in life. Sometimes you got to get over it, and this is a story where I get a really big one. And the whole thing was that should have been like near the last of my trips to MEPS before that time. But what happened was it turned out to be a lot more difficult than I imagined. And what happened was a lot of it was due to, just, trying to keep my E4, which ultimately didn't even happen, which makes it more kind of a very disappointing and just annoying story in life. It's like I just could not make that happen. And in fact, kind of got bamboozled on it. So let me back up a second and explain. So I'm thinking I'm going to go back in JO3 journalist third class E4, doing the cross rate. I'm going to the A school first. Oh well and good. And then I hear, okay, so to come back in a non-commissioned petty officer, you have to go through a waiver process, standard boilerplate. Happens all the time. Just realize you're doing it. You're cross rating, which makes it a little harder. And of course, there's all this and that. But the first thing that comes up is like, my MEPS examination came with things the Navy CO of MEPS did not like. And what I mean is by things that, were already documented, for me at least, already documented by the Navy. And for other people were, standard things that everyone had: tattoos, piercings, of the like. She was just a very stickler for it. Anybody who popped either one of those things, like she would personally interview, I guess, to see if they belonged in her glorious Navy. It's one of those things that just seemed very petty and abusive of power in a small reach kind of position, but also a very dangerous reach. She was passing, it felt like someone passing moral views based on, is like, you have a group of people who look at these tattoos, look at these piercings, and make these decisions. And, it's, it just, this is about 2002. So maybe it's a cultural gap. I don't know. But, bottom line is I had 2 ear piercings that date back to high school, which I joined the Navy with and were passed the first time. And I had 2 tattoos, which I'd both got in the Navy and were also documented in my record. So my whole thing is like, okay, I mean, this is bullshit. They shouldn't, get this kind of attention from the top person at MEPS when you have a team of people. But in my situation, it was like, all my shit's already documented. It's, why are we, and it doesn't matter, you need to see her. And I was like, okay. So it ended up being this just parade of nonsense. The first time I go to MEPS to do the interview with a CO, like, we get snowed out. And so we have to wait. We end up, losing that day. And then we try to make it up, I think, the next weekend. And she's not there that week. Like, no one told me, no one, just like, okay, move everything to the next the next MEPS thing, and she wasn't there. I show up all ready to go, and I'm sitting there going to have to go through MEPS again, and it's like I'm just going through the same shit over and over again. They keep running through the stations, like, okay, you already did this, okay, you already did this, and but they'll weigh you in and all that shit every time. But and then the third time finally, it's just like same thing happens. I show up and they're like, yeah, she's not here again, and I pull the guy. I directly talk to the guy, sailor to sailor. I'm like, look, dude, I'm not one of these other. I'm not a boot camper here. I'm like, I'm a nav vet. I'm friggin' 6 years. He's like, yeah, I know. I was like, dude, yeah, I've done 6 years as a yeoman, man. Look at me. I'm trying to feed my family here, and this keeps holding me up. And like, if this doesn't go well today, it's going to be another couple weeks before we try this again. And the process here. It's like, yeah, okay. And the dude, to his credit, went off and got a hold of, if not her, then her representative, and they came back and approved it, through the phone call. And I'm very grateful for that guy. And one of the perks I used of being a nav vet at MEPS was just like, hey, dude, come on. So yeah, I finally get it. So they give me the approval of the waiver, and then they give me the date to come back to MEPS, where I'll officially sign back in and then start my drive down to Jacksonville, because that's where the retreads of the Southeast go. So we'll go through the whole process again, like 2 weeks later, but this time it's for processing out. This is the big day. I'm signing back in, and finally all this bullshit's behind me. I got everything packed in my car, my 98 Ford Escort, ready to go outside and go to sign my final soaring in papers, and it's like, you will come back in the Navy as an E3 JOSN. And I'm like, excuse me, hey, I just did this whole thing to fight for my E4. Like, what the fuck is this? It's like, oh yeah, someone went and looked and came back. It's like, oh yeah, you got approved for the waiver, but then it went to the JO community. They turned it down because they're overmanned at JO3 right now. If you want to keep your third, we can see if we can switch this to PN3. And here's the thing, I should have questioned at the time, and I didn't. Was exactly what that meant. As I said, would that mean I cross-rate to PN3, but I'm still going to go to JOA school? I didn't ask that. I assumed you can cross-rate to PN3, and that's what you're going to be as a fucking PN3, which was definitely not what I wanted to do. And I did not raise that question. I didn't even think about it for, I don't know how long. And I look back on that moment, it was like at least months. I'm like, is that what they may have meant? But I didn't. And so at the time, I'm just like, I was so sick and tired of just the whole rigmarole. I'm trying to get the paycheck back. I was like, I have a wife at the time, I was like, she's living with my, we're both living with my parents, and we were, right before I got, unceremoniously fired, we were about to, move into an apartment, and all this, and that all got put on hold, and months, and I was like, I'll get, I just like, I'll know I'll get third class back first time I'm up for it. Just, okay. I'm thinking like, okay, it's March now, right? 6 months. I'll take the test in September. I'll pass it. Okay, whatever. So are you sure? Like, they put me back in. They actually gave me orders to boot camp, which was funny because I spend the whole time, talking to the new kids, and they're like, so you got to go to boot camp again? I'm like, no, they don't make you go through boot camp again, because how pointless and stupid would that be? And son of a gun, they cut me orders to Great Lakes, Illinois. And as soon as I go to question it, and like we just all been sworn in, which is the funny part. And I go to the guy, and he's like, and he's treating me like, I guess he treats everyone after they get sworn in, because they get used for boot camp. And he's kind of being gruff with me. I'm like, oh, dude, I'm all due respect, petty officer, I'm a nav service vet, and yeah, I should be going to TPU Jacksonville, not Great Lakes. And he's like, oh, you're like, someone was not paying attention, apparently. And he grabs it. I think he was another PN1. He's like, you're a service vet? Oh, yeah, you shouldn't be doing this. Sorry about that, dude. Go sit in the whatever and, wait. I think like an hour later, they came back and they cut me the correct orders. So still kind of funny in retrospect, because, when I show the orders to the kids that were going to boot, it's like, oh, so you got to go anyway? I'm like, not if I can fucking help it. Because I mean, I just it would be just a horrible idea as someone who's been through that. I understand the Marines make everyone else go through their boot camp again, but and the real to go through the same boot camp at the same time, over again is like what purpose are you serving other than to disrupt the whole thing? Is you can imagine sending a guy with 6 years experience back through boot camp and just you know I mean, I guess it could work out, but at the same time, it's like you just imagine the trouble it would cause because, I mean, he would just be constantly telling everyone in his boot camp division all sorts of things perhaps they don't want to hear about or know about, or, how much, how much of intimidation would he have towards the petty officer's authority, knowing, absolutely sure once he's out of here, he never has to hear from these fools again. I mean, it's a whole different ballgame, but, I always thought it funny. So I get on the road and I go down to wonderful Jacksonville, good 8 hour drive from Atlanta. I get on base just fine. I got civilian clothes. I had usable uniforms. Like I kept all my uniforms. It hadn't been out that long, but you kind of get an iggy for not having a uniform like the first couple of weeks. They call ahead and like have name tapes. But this is the point of utilities. So we had to have name tapes made. And you go there and like I think on my first day, I got there at night. But the next morning, like I went down to get the uniforms tailored, whatnot, and like they already had my name tapes made up. Like MEPS had been on top of some shit, so props on that part. Interesting story. When I went to get my ID card made the next morning, the PN that checked me in was no other than Lucy Davis, a friend of mine, a coworker from the Blue Ridge. She had been a deck seaman, worked her way into the PNA school, got the became a PN3 on my ship, and now and I was a YN3 when she struck into PNSN. So when I come back and I'm coming back in the Navy as an E3, she's an E5, she's a PN2. But she recognized me in the line, like I'm walking in with my paperwork from MEPS and my driver's license, basically. And she just spots me, and I spot her, and I'm like, hey. She's like, hey. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. I'm getting back in the Navy. She's like, there's this line of other people in front of me. She's just like, oh, ignore it. Good, come here. And of course, she took care of me. So she is now a lieutenant and still continuing her Navy career. And God bless her, Lucy. You're good people. But yeah, I got to go just kind of walk around in just civies and TPU and transient personnel unit for those not non familiar with the term. It's a place where if you have you're on waiting to go somewhere. I ended up spending time in a few waiting to go to a ship, waiting to get out of the Navy, waiting to get back in the Navy. And I talked about TPU and Yokosuka many tales ago. But in this case, it was a little different. It was like it was like the E3 thing at the time was not a big deal because we were all, it was a huge collection of fellow retreads, some who were in the same boat, some who were still third or second classes. Who, of course, they they knew your story because you all talked to each other. So, it was never, even the people in charge of TPU, I never got treated less than, what my old rate was in E4 because, I showed up on time and like I was, super squared away with my uniforms at the time. So they looked at me as like, we know this guy. You've spent a long time as a PO3. He's a retread coming back in, and I always got treated that way, and that's something I would tell anyone. Definitely how you carry yourself and your demeanor will dictate your treatment a lot of times. And in this case, at least in TPU, that certainly was the case because they did know how to look at people different ways because they had to deal with people from so many different circumstances. But the next part of that, what ended up fucking me that whole year, came back up again. It's like I think damn near everyone I came through with, at least initially, like they were retreads, like they were all staying in their same rate. I was the one guy changing, so they all got orders pretty quick. A few guys had C schools and whatnot coming, took a little longer, and then of course we knew the different people who were waiting. various med holds, legal holds, just new guys from the boot camp waiting for the ship. I cycled through all those for such a long time because I was in a weird situation where like, well, they have to make room for you at the school. Then right now they're telling us it looks like it's a 4 month wait, and they'd rather have you wait here than at the A school. They want you to start as soon as you get there. It's like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I'll just spend 4 months in Jacksonville. And eventually, like I got off the shit details, which is like picking up trash and a bunch of illegal shady shit. They were providing like volunteer bodies for golf tournaments, which I know in retrospect definitely were not illegal because those were not volunteers. They were voluntold because of the virtue of being a TPU. But another story for another day. But eventually I got taken off all that shit because they're like, okay, this guy's gonna be here for a while. And there's the brig there in Jacksonville. It's not a long-term brig, but it's for you know people in the Mayport Jacksonville area. You get a lot of dudes messing with underage girls, uh, drug dealers, a lot of UAs, stuff like that, domestic abuse. Nothing super serious, but yeah, we had those guys there, and like I saw guys that were at the TBU part legal hold get moved over when the charges changed. That was the guy who ended up charged with distributing ecstasy, which was like the huge drug. It was like 2002. Like it was, very hard to detect on piss tests, and it was like just huge. And the military all over. There was Marine we hung out with in the TPU who was just like part of like the Marine Reserve detachment. He got put on active duty waiting on legal hold for failing a drug test for ecstasy, and like he was just around forever because it took so long to process paperwork from the reservists because they're only in the office so often. And yeah, I was I said my uniforms were squared away and professional, and I was professional, and I was an E3, but I obviously my experience showed a lot in those situations, so they put me in the answering phones at the brig, which is interesting because I got to learn a lot about what goes on at a brig. They also had the correctional custody unit there, which there wasn't I don't think there's a whole lot in the military left if there are any, but back then they still had them. I had a friend went through it, but he did it in A school, so it was interesting they had this kind of correctional it's a correctional program. It's kind of like going through like a mini boot camp at the brig, but you're not on the brig wardy. It's a whole weird thing. We had Coast Guards there, guys there too. But mostly, yeah. I mean, I was praised often for just my professionalism and awesome phone answering skills. And I'll be honest, I showed up to that job fucking hung over as shit so many fucking times because there's not a lot to do in TPU, and Jacksonville's a fun place. So I may have made up a few medical appointments that didn't exist so I could sleep in a bit. But I mean, that was the whole. That was Jacksonville, and I enjoyed a lot of it. Yeah, I made some friends. Some people even would see later in the fleet. But eventually, I get the orders to come, and like I had to go out to Fort Meade, Maryland. That's where the media training schools are for all the military. Times photography, journalism, broadcasting. That was kind of like the three main staples. And there's where I noticed an immediate difference between that and TPU. I get in and slick sleeve E3, but I'm former fleet returnee, so I don't have to go through all the phases and all the boot camp bullshit that the new guys do. But I guess like I straight up told the guys because I'm thinking I'm talking to fellow real sailors, and I tell like the JO1 in charge of the school the what do you call it, the barracks house at the time. I was like, hey man, I just got off the road. Like I drove all night to get here, and like it's like, hey, I just want to check in real quick, drop my paperwork, and like get my room and go sleep until tomorrow morning. He's like, oh yeah. I was like, I understand where you come from. Yeah, it's really tough. And I ended up staying up all day, and it just kept, it was like decided like they're just gonna put me through, all the welcome because there was like a bunch of other guys there too. So it's just like, well, screw you. You're going through, first day in doc like everyone else, and we're all, fleet returnees and boot campers alike going through like the same fucking shit about what to expect and blah blah blah. You know, probably very good for someone straight out of boot camp, but the fleet returnees there, like me and one other guy were both fleet returnees, and we're just like, yeah, you could have covered what we needed to know in 5 minutes, and in my case, let me go to fucking bed. And that part never really got better. I mean, I really enjoyed, like, I made so many friends with for the most part, it was junior guys coming through. And I always felt like the old man, but at the time I was 6 years older than them on average, not even that 5'4". The media rates tend to attack a little bit of older guys who maybe done some college. So a lot. I think the average age is probably maybe 4 years younger than me, but and then there's enough other fleet returnees. My friend from the Cusca area, he ended up going there as a PH on the Indy slash Kitty Hawk. And a buddy of mine from the Blue Ridge ended up going there. My friend Chris Bush, I think I've talked about on here many times. He ended up cross-riding from LI to JO. Me and him hung out, and a bunch of other people. But I was in that weird position where I didn't have any rank. I had all this experience, so I can kind of hang out with all the juniors because I'm an E3, and there's no, like, if you were an E4 and above, there were rules in the at the time in the house was, petty officers cannot hang out with the students, but they could hang out with they could hang out with E3s who were fleet returnees like myself, and me as a fleet returnee. As an E3, I could hang out with both sides, and of course, my 4 years in E4 doesn't even factor into that because I mean, how could they come up with that? But what ended up happening a lot was it was a lot of getting put in charge of stuff a lot of times, especially because I spent another 4 months there waiting to class up because the message did not go through to the big Navy got the message I was supposed to go to journalism school that August, but the schoolhouse itself didn't hear about it until I showed up. So I ended up spending another 4 months waiting to class up. So I was basically in charge of cleanliness of the barracks. I was there was an MS or would have been an MS1 then, not a CS1 yet. I was in charge, and I was just his right hand man for forever. And I was the barracks guy, and I found out when people don't like you and resent you, is like I thought I was pretty cool, and everyone saw like, yeah, he's a guy with experience, but he's one of us. He's one of the E3s. And a couple of guys didn't get that, and especially because they worked for me for a while cleaning. And I rubbed them the wrong way, and it's kind of one of those situations where I wasn't realizing what I was doing, and I was doing things from the fleet that I didn't really explain to them. And they see me as a slick sleeve E3, and they're like, why do you think you have a fucking authority? And it was a lot of times going back and explaining to some people, I found that out from, and some I knew like never really did forgive it, and it ended up being a dislike for the entire time we were both serving in weird ways. It's like I get it because people come from their own certain point of views and perspectives, and when you're bad at presenting yourself correctly and you kind of come at it arrogantly, like I'm Mr. 6 years veteran, former E4, been around the world. You new guys, and it's like, yeah, I'm here at the same rank and position as you, but I got so much more going for me, and some people totally thought that was cool. Some people thought I was a fucking asshole. And I don't think I was ever pointing for that much cockiness. And then we had other people who ended up coming through there, fleet returnees. Were fucking born leaders. Definitely more than me. I have my place in the universe, but it's not as a leader of men. A guy we'll call him, it was at the time QM2 Thompson. He's now a chief, and his whole life is an interesting story, and I'm glad I got to spend a little time with him at DINFO's Defense Information School in Maryland. He was just a cool guy, and there's so much to his story that hopefully one day I'll get to interview him on this show. Um, but overall, yeah, like I eventually got, it took me two tries to get YN3 back or get JO3, get my E4 back. First time I missed it by less than a point, and I ended up calling my last command because I remembered like, oh, wasn't I doing an end of tour now? And I call back, and they're like, yeah, you got one. Hold on, call back tomorrow. Let me go find it. What happened? And I called it the next day, and they're like, yeah, the new CO came in after you left, and he didn't know you, and he's like, why the fuck am I going to give a name to a guy who got out of the Navy? So no, you didn't get it, dude. So I picked it up like right before I left the school. Went through the journalism, print side, and broadcast side. Finally put back on my E4. I dealt with a bunch of, and you know, wrapping up a little bit. Just I had issues, especially with the Army inside the school. I think I mentioned before. My problems with the Army over the years. That's where a lot of it starts. A lot of guys who just I got a lot, was treated like a fellow service member for a while who wasn't a boot camper, and then they turn around and just harshly fuck you over some minor infraction, even if you thought you had covered your ass, and it turned out like so and so didn't talk to so and so, so this didn't get up there, and you go to explain like, oh well, here's what happened, and all of a sudden it's like, we don't care, fuck you, you're another student, you're another nobody. So that kind of, I learned really quickly is like, never count on anything. Definitely never go anything arrogant, especially when you have that power. But also realize, people do look up to you, and and depending on your demeanor, can really be listening to you in those situations where you're a senior guy, you got experience. Because that happened to me a lot there, and for the most part, was a positive experience, and I'm glad I got to do it. You know, and looking back, as old as I thought I was compared to them, it was drops in the bucket, looking at 42. But yeah, it was a lot of it was a real stumbling block coming back in. But overall, I think it was a good experience for me, and really helped me moving forward in my career once I left school and started back in the real Navy. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, this is a really long one, and hope you enjoyed it. And that's all Salty Seaman's got for now. Talk to you freaks later. Peace.